Yo, what up, everybody? Welcome to Turn Bark Time. I'm the Turn,
I'm the Bark.
and we are going to be here a long time. Guys, this is Season 5. That's right, Season 5. Who'd have thunk, Barker? It awes me sometimes. Episode 8.
8.
You call these spirit fingers? These are spirit fingers. Such an overrated movie. But anyway, we promise you, the good people, the tens of fans we have, that we would discuss one of the most controversial things on Gen Z's agenda. That is, with this new bill for an aid package passed last weekend. Am I correct on that one? Yeah, last week.
It was signed by Biden last Wednesday.
Okay, so signed by Biden last Wednesday. That the tickety talk, not to be confused with the Facegram or the Instabook, right, had a possibility of being banned in the United States. So, fascinating point. Barker, I want to point out that both presidential candidates in this year's election, rephrase that sentence, both main party presidential candidates, because I don't know where Robert F. Kennedy stands on this, have both tried to or agreed to maneuver in this way towards ushering TikTok out if certain conditions are not met.
Interesting. So a bill was passed. It is HR 7521, and the short name is the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversaries Controlled Applications Act.
That wasn't small.
I
you don't
actually looked at a PDF of the actual text of the bill.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And that Jim was in there. So
Jim was in there.
Yes. So apparently half of America is on the TikTok.
Yeah, 170 million roughly.
Yeah, somewhere between 150 to 170. TikTok keeps using the 170 million American users. Fun fact, 0% of Turn Bark Time is on TikTok.
Fascinating fact, we are the outliers. That's why we have tens of followers.
Tens of followers. That's why we are not monetized in any way, shape, or form.
Except for our merch.
Yes, which is there.
Yeah. It's just there.
It's there. According to CBS News, from TikTok, they are saying that, right, they promoted it as 170 million American users are going to lose their freedom of speech via the internet. 7 million businesses will lose their ability to connect with their, clients. And it's going to, that TikTok generates $24 billion to the U.S. economy.
$1 billion, you say?
Annually. $24 billion.
Yeah, on a million yen. Also name that movie, folks.
You guys are not, well, some of our tens of followers are old enough to know that reference.
That is valid.
You young pups are going to have to
not that reference.
Gonna have to look that one up. So essentially what the bill says is that TikTok has 6 months to be sold to American owners, because the problem is that TikTok is owned by a company called ByteDance, which is based out of China.
Yep.
People's Republic of China, not the good China. It's Taiwan.
His favorite China.
And apparently, ByteDance apparently has 150,000 employees that span the globe. It started in 2012. If you didn't know, I went down a deep dive about what is ByteDance, what do they do? The concern is, so Senator Mark Warner, who's a Virginia Democrat, said it's the concern is that it's a communist propaganda tool, and it has the ability to scrape the personal data of 170 million Americans.
Yep. Right,
ranging from your browsing history to, I think they were saying certain biometric. They're concerned that it could, the biometric stuff to unlock your phone.
Yep.
Even though ByteDance very, very strongly has said we've never shared with the Chinese government and we will say no even if they ask. But according to the Associated Press, Chinese law essentially says that all Chinese corporations will comply with the Chinese government.
It's one of the biggest arguments is that if the Chinese government, so in China, if you're doing business in China, the Communist Party can the Communist Party can tell you to hand over the data that they would like to have, and by law you have to hand it over. So again, when we look at this, like when we talk about it, it's one of those where I heard they upped it, I thought, in the new bill to 270 days. So is that, I think it's 9 months now is roughly what it is. And
if it's 6 months, there's a deal in negotiation, they get an additional 3 months.
Okay. Because I also read that it could go, when I was reading the New York Times, that it said that it could also expand. The president had the ability to expand it to up to a year to make sure that a deal could go through.
I think it's just if they're showing progress toward trying to essentially get rid of the Chinese investment and sell to an American-based company, that they would get they'd get more time.
Okay, got it.
And one of the other kind of interesting things about this is that in 9 months, America, if you're not good at the math, or the maths, like they say in Britain, that puts you in January of 2025, which means that potentially is either Joe Biden getting re-inaugurated or Donald Trump or some other dark horse candidate.
RFK.
Yeah, who may or may not have a chance, Ralph Nader. So it might actually get punted to the next president. So there's actually no guarantee that this policy has been signed by one administration, but it might not even, by the time it comes to actual brass tacks of do we ban TikTok, which doesn't mean that it gets deleted from your phone. I looked at an Associated Press article. It just means that it's taken off of the Google Play, the Google Store, and the Apple Store.
Yep. No, keep going. Finish that thought on that one.
Yeah, and it won't be updated, so eventually it'll become obsolete, and then people will just pick better apps that do the same thing, kind of like how TikTok killed, or Vine died, and TikTok's the new Vine.
Yeah. But also, like, taking a look at, like, when TikTok blew up and became a big thing, right? Meta's response to that was Instagram Reels, Facebook Reels, right? YouTube's response, so Google's response to it was YouTube Shorts, right? They people adapt, people overcome, and it's funny because we mentioned this in class, and my kids were like, "I'm going to YouTube Shorts. YouTube Shorts will be my friend." I was like, okay, everybody just calm down. The other thing that we're not talking about here yet is this, as most things in our country do, when controversial laws or people that view these laws as controversial come through, where do they go, Barker?
The Supreme Court.
Yes, but we have to start in lower courts, unfortunately. But we're going to start in lower federal court. This is going to be and this is where I found it interesting, because I remember that President Trump had come out to try and ban TikTok. He was not a fan of it. I think it was actually in 2020 was his attempt, and it gets smacked down by the federal courts, saying and TikTok's argument, or ByteDance's argument, is that by shutting us down or telling us that we have to sell, you are limiting the free speech of 170 million users. And I thought about that argument, and I was like, that seems like such a stretch. But going back and looking at it, I'm like, no, like when we talk about ByteDance, if ByteDance were to sell TikTok to somebody else, there's nothing saying that new entity could not change the rules or the policies of that company on what could be, submitted or published on their site. So that happened first. The next one was actually Montana tried to ban TikTok within its state borders. And that also was stricken down by a separate federal judge on the same argument of the First Amendment. And so I thought it was interesting. I thought they were going to go with like something like a commerce clause, or like kind of dig into the brass tacks of the Constitution. I didn't think that First Amendment would be where they would go, or that they would argue First Amendment as a company, I'm entitled to the First Amendment, right? Like we've seen with like Disney and like a couple other people have gotten in big arguments about how companies have First Amendment rights as well.
Yeah, well, and I mean, the response to TikTok has been by other U.S. allies in Europe has been there are a number of other countries that have banned TikTok.
Yeah.
Either partially by government employees, whether it's the EU, like Belgium. I think India has a complete ban on TikTok.
Yep, they do.
And then the interesting thing is that TikTok doesn't, any content that's made outside of China on TikTok does not get distributed inside of China, as well as any content that is made on Douyin, which is the Chinese version of TikTok, like the domestic version of TikTok for China, does not get out of China to the world. And it was interesting because they were saying that 80% of users of Douyin are between 18 and 45 in China. However, I think half of the users in the United States on TikTok are women between 35 and 55 or something like that.
Really?
Yeah, so it was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
That there's a shift or kind of a difference in like who's using it. But they were also saying that in America it's more art-based.
Right.
And in China, Douyin is more focused on like lifestyle and like, and I don't know if that means hacks or but like just like they quantified it as lifestyle and like practical like skills.
Okay.
And so that's been one of the, I think that's kind of, I don't know if that's been, since we don't get to go inside China.
Yeah.
It's hard to know like whether these comparisons are fair or if they're kind of like a hasty generalization.
Yeah.
But some people say, well, you know, Douyin or TikTok in China helps people become better and learn how to do stuff.
Right.
Where in America,
yeah, we don't.
We're not people sitting on the couch and swiping.
Yeah. Well, that's what I find. So I find that interesting because I talked about it with, again, we talked about Jill Copenhaver. We referenced her in our previous episode. And I asked her about it and I said, you know, Jill, I said, like, I said, are you doing any of the dances or anything like that? And she goes, no, she goes, Zach, I'm not doing the dances. She goes, all my stuff is set up for like astronomy and science and math. And she goes, so my algorithm, like, because I search certain keywords, is more about teaching me about different areas of the world than, or science or math or other disciplines rather than dances or, you know, whatever's trending at the moment. So I thought that was interesting because again, that is the power of like we don't have TikTok. I use Instagram if I'm scrolling, but again, like I'm kind of mindful about what I stop to look at, right? And so like if I stop to look at a video, I'm like, okay, remember if you stop and actually watch this and you keep rewatching it, like this is what you're going to get, you know, because it's following you. So it just was interesting to see that. The other thing with this that I find like fascinating is if you were to ban it, right, there's other ways around the ban, right? Like VPNs, and you know, what was that? Oh, SIM cards from other countries.
Foreign SIM cards, yeah.
And so it's interesting to see like how you do it. Now, the one thing that going back to the court case and everything that has held up is in court, Texas has won a lawsuit to keep it off of government phones. And the lawsuit was from professors at Texas universities that were studying trends like with TikTok. And they argued that they couldn't study it if they don't have access to it on the government devices. And the judge ruled that no, for security purposes, this does hold merit. So
yeah, I know there was as I was researching, I came across it was a article from the University of Michigan saying that if you wanted access or were doing research for a federal grant, that you could not have TikTok present on your devices because that's a requirement of the federal government.
Oh.
So, and it's a fairly recent kind of addition, you know what I mean? Because it's a new thing that's happening. The outcry and like I watched, who is it? Was it Colbert? Yeah. Stephen Colbert really quickly said, immediately, like after this came out, there was a push notification that came out across TikTok that told TikTok users to contact Congress and tell them to not take away their free speech, which if that doesn't prove the point that it has the ability to influence politics in America, like Chip Roy, who is a Republican representative from Texas, has received thousands of phone calls from, I guess you call them pre-constituents.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no, they're still constituents. Like they might not vote for him, but like they're still in his boundaries, aren't they?
Fair enough. But like they're a lot of
they're younger than
children. Yeah. Are calling their politicians to save TikTok. And I guess kind of the thing that's frustrating to me, and I mean, I guess we're part of the problem because we're talking about TikTok instead of something else, but like our federal government is concerned about banning TikTok and fixing live concert tickets because of like the price of the Eras tour. But we aren't taking care of, like, we can't hardly agree to send money to help Ukraine or to figure out like Palestine, Israel. But we're really concerned about TikTok and concert tickets.
Well, and then even things at home and abroad, right? Like, again, it's interesting because it's an image thing. It's like you said, this is something that everyone passed, and that I think is it fair to say that this is it's bipartisan, but it's a conservative driven side of the coin. Do you think that's fair? Or do you think it's an even bipartisanship?
I haven't looked at the vote tallies, and it's really like, I would say if I had to go with like historical like trends, I would say that it would be bipartisan, but
okay. So let's
I've been surprised by certain parties' stances on certain foreign policies with certain countries.
True. Okay, that's fair. So let's call it a bipartisan thing. But like when we look at this like bipartisan drive to focus on this, like it's a checkbox on the thing that I can say on the campaign. Well, we did this. We did that. Like we've made it so that they can't do that. And it's like, okay, but have you?
Right. And I mean,
that's my argument for why we're talking about it, is the fact that like it comes out and everyone's saying that like TikTok's going to be banned and everything like that. But like, we're talking 9 months down the road, 6 to 9 months down the road before we even see anything, let alone the fact that if you have TikTok, that it will exist for at least a couple of months before they start updating stuff and you lose some of that ability. So.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I don't know. This is where both parties in our country and our government system are it's kind of silly, because you have Biden, who signed this bill into law, but yet was campaigning on TikTok earlier this year, which has been a sticking point for conservatives, with him going, well, if you think it's bad, why are you on it? You're saying that government employees can't be on it, but yet your campaign is using it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I mean, they're trying to, and then you probably have, I would guess, over half of Congress who doesn't even understand what TikTok is because it's a smartphone app.
Right.
And they're not quite.
That's a separate issue for a separate day.
Yeah, we'll cover term limits and like, should there be a max age later. But yeah, I mean, it's one of these things that people say, oh, it's a slippery slope. Like, don't you care that like, if like the benefiter or the beneficiaries of this policy are going to be, like you've already said, Reels on Instagram, Shorts on YouTube, those companies are either going to potentially buy TikTok from ByteDance, mm-hmm. or it's going to push users to their platforms.
Right.
And some of the countries who have completely outright banned, like some of the bans that have happened to TikTok have not been under the most pure of political intentions.
Yeah.
So like one of them is Afghanistan. The Taliban decided that TikTok was corrupting the young people of Afghanistan, which, I mean, that's kind of the argument that's happening in America, but we don't exactly want to say that we agree with the Taliban. Right. And then in like Armenia, Yeah, there's countries where they've gotten into clashes, and during those clashes, governments have banned TikTok, which some people are saying is a way of trying to muzzle free speech and like
Yep.
primary, not even primary source, like live streaming, like citizen news reporting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could go out on a limb and call that a primary source. Not even a limb. I wouldn't even call that because it's happening then and now, right? And so that gives you the view. It's the reason that China doesn't let their stuff leave China and nothing comes into China, right? Because the more you know, right? Knowledge is power. So G.I. Joe.
Yeah, so I mean, like, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think by saying a ban on TikTok, it sounds scarier than what the reality is actually going to be.
Yeah.
Because 170 million people already have the app.
Yeah.
And even if they ban it, at this point, what it sounds like, as long as you don't delete it, you're still going to have it.
Yeah.
I swear it was Fortnite Mobile. Fortnite Mobile, something similar happened where it came out for a while, and then there was a disagreement between either Apple or Google, and they delisted it. But if you had already downloaded it, you could play it because you already had the program on your phone. You know what I mean? So I'm interested to see. I understand the security risk,
Right.
because I mean, I don't know. I think that's the great frontier is cyber terrorism. And like working in schools, we get, I don't know about you guys in Quincy, maybe they do, like, but here in Longview, like I get probably 4 to 5 like AI generated like phishing emails in my work account a week.
Yeah, I've been getting more. They still hit the one that I've actually been getting more on my phone that have been like text messages that have been like, hey, like I'm a recruiter with da 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 da. Like, I'm just like, are you though?
Yeah.
Are you though?
Mine is like, oh, hello, my name, the name of the person who, like when they send you an email, it tells you who the person who's sending it is, and then the name on the actual email address doesn't match. And I'd be like, hi, my name is Stefan. And then like, my child is interested in sport. Would you coach them? How much do you charge per hour? I would very much like to communicate with you, but it doesn't say what sport.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, you're not real people, dude. Um,
So I mean, and I think we can all agree. Like you saw, like you mentioned when like because TikTok did it or ByteDance did a thing where they sent all the information out of TikTok, and I did see a report, and I'm not gonna go into detail on quoting it because I'm not 100% sure. I don't know if I can find it again, but it basically was saying that like one of the calls from a student that had TikTok or a teenager, they called and they passed the phone to the representative of the senator, and like I said, I cannot remember which. And the senator like or representative asked them like why shouldn't I ban it? And they're like, well, it's my free speech. And they're like, can you explain? Well, yeah, like to click on the next video, I have to call you. And it was like, oh, okay. You know what I mean? And there was and that was and I asked my students about it, and they said, yeah. They said like right when it happened, it popped up, and it was like the thing you had to watch that video. You couldn't like turn it off, and if you like close the app and open it back up, it would open up that video again until you watched it through. So
yeah, and like, I I understand it's a security risk, and I think there's a number of other countries that like require every major like require corporations inside of their country to be primarily owned by somebody in their country.
yeah,
And I think it allows them to have control over it. And so we've opened the door to allow some other source. And like that's where people are like, well, what about X? What about, Facebook? Like Zuckerberg and Elon Musk can scrape all of our data too. And then I guess the argument from the government is that, well, yeah, but if they sell it to China, we'll throw them in like federal prison for espionage. Um, so it's like, yes, is social media like scraping all of our data? Yes, they're all dirty, and like we're on YouTube, so I mean it's happening right now with
yeah,
us too. Even though we're the good guys,
scrape our data.
it's one of those things that you kind of, to a certain extent, I think we've almost become like numb to it.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Because I mean, like Facebook circulates about once every month. You'll see the ones where it's I have to copy and paste this so that they don't.
Oh,
Facebook is not allowed to charge me money for my account. And it's like, dude, they've never ever
done
said,
yeah.
and it's more likely that by you copying and pasting that, you just gave somebody some other nefarious source like
Yeah.
access to your account,
Yep.
even to a greater degree.
Yep. 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 Yep.
Oh man.
So the biggest thing I think that we can all like talk about this is we're talking about it because it is a big issue for the generation below millennials. It is the Gen Alpha, the Gen Z. Like this is a big deal for them. This is a major communication tool. It's a major platform tool. And one of the unique things, I actually got to do kind of like a little mini lesson about we call them Gen Alpha, Gen Z, whatever you want to kind of interchangeably, the group that comes after millennials. And talking about them, like it's a very unique kid. Like this is a kid who's grown up with social media, cell phones, right? Like I think we've talked about this before, but like my first phone I remember was my little Verizon flip phone. I thought it was the coolest friggin' thing. And kids will never understand the struggle with T9 word, right? When they can just talk into their phone and it does it for them. But it's they're more socially active. They say their piece. They know, like they have more respect for boundaries. They have more respect for the little guy, right? Underprivileged groups. Their social awareness is higher, but they do have this separation from the world of social media and pulls them away. So they do have these things like, because I'll have kids ask me, and I'm sure you do too, where they're like, well, you know what's going on in blah, blah, blah. And you're like, yeah, like I read it about this. And they're like, oh, I saw like a 10-second video.
I think, and I'm sorry that I didn't say this earlier.
Oh yeah.
NBC on their Instagram reel,
Not their TikTok?
not their TikTok, because I don't go there, was saying that like I think it was 1/3 of all like teens get their news from TikTok. And I mean, like there are a number of kids in class, and like this is what Jill's talking about, is like there is legit like decent people like us who are on there who are just trying to spit facts and like
be clear, we're not on there.
yeah, we're like those people, but we're not there. We're here, we're better, and that's why there's tens of you. But like it is things are changing.
Yep.
People don't sit and watch the nightly news.
No.
Like I had kids today go off, like they were all just befuddled that I did not know about some World War II unit that did terrible things for like the Empire of Japan. And they were like, everyone should know. And I'm like, you guys, it's because it came across your algorithm. Like it didn't come across my algorithm because I'm not into like serial killer, like true crime. Like I'm not a teenager, but I did verbatim hear a kid repeat a YouTube short that I watched about soldiers in Afghanistan saying, international soldiers saying that they hope that there was an American in their unit because America doesn't, if we're in trouble, like we immediately say we're on our way and then we'll figure out the details when we get there, but we're going to come rescue you where other people are going to get bogged down in bureaucracy. But again, that's information that's out there that is pro-American.
Yep.
So it's like, do we question, like, and that's one of the things that I always think about too, like, do you question the things that say what you like with the same veracity that you question the things that you disagree with?
100%. And it's no, and look at this, like and again, we're on a side bubble right now with algorithms and things like that. But like I use my algorithms like Google News, and like on Google News, I have to make sure that every now and then I open up like a source, or like look, there's a source that's like, hey, this is the headline. Okay, I want to read this, but then there's a lower button in the corner that gives me all the stories, and then I go read, all the stories, and I spend time on them, so that the algorithm doesn't just give me what I want to read. It gives me the opposite side as well, so that I can really dive in, right? Because I think it's fair to say that most every entity in the world has a bias that they support, and they want to clarify that bias. And so you got to try to navigate your way through. But I like the way you said that, where it's like it's hard to look at and say, okay, I like this. Am I going to question it? Yeah, I agree with you. Versus like the person who's says something that disagrees, like, no, like, why would you think that? Like, da 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 da. And it's the same thing. They're just really good. And this is probably my last little note on social media is if you have not watched the Netflix show, and I'm not going to remember off the top of my Social Dilemma, I think is the name of it. If you haven't watched it, you need to watch it. And it's a little over dramatic for my taste, but it gives you a really good point about why we argue so much and why we think so many people are wrong. And it's because my algorithm that shows me my news, that shows me my stories, is different from your algorithm. And even if we think alike, we're not necessarily going to get the exact same story. And that's why when somebody says something and you're like, oh my God, how could they think that? What is wrong with them? What algorithm are they looking at? Like, what are they seeing? Because they're probably saying the same thing about what you're saying because they're seeing something completely different. And so to go out and hunt, which takes effort to get the news you want versus the news that is as unbiased as you can get. So that's my little soapbox.
Yep. And I mean, I think that's really like one of the concerns there too, outside of the data, is that it really has proven that they have the ability to push notifications that could influence even like, and maybe it's not adults, like it's almost in the same way like the cigarette companies, like with Joe Camel back in the day, it was like, oh, you have a cartoon mascot. Is that meant to appeal to 35 to 50-year-olds? And I'm like, no, like 12 to 18. And it's like, but those people can't smoke, but they will someday, right? The majority of advertising is targeted at a younger generation to establish kind of like what me and another department member kind of talked about, like it's like economic imperialism, but instead of imperialism like trying to gain territory, we're trying to gain people.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, like look at us, we were wearing our eye clothing, got to support the little guys. But if I can establish you as a Coca-Cola consumer,
yep,
at a young age, or that you only wear Nikes, or that you wear Under Armour,
yeah,
I can guarantee for the rest of your life that you're going to buy this. So I think the concern is that we're okay with America doing that to Americans, but are we okay with foreign powers doing that?
Absolutely.
In America is the concern.
Yeah, no, it's 100%. It's that, and that's the concern, and the interesting thing is that we talk about this like. I saw this in that Social Dilemma documentary, was that there was a law that was passed that said you couldn't advertise to children during Saturday morning cartoons, right? And that was Saturday morning cartoons. Now for YouTube for kids and for Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, I mean, let's be real, kids aren't on Facebook. Some of them are, but like not really. There's no filter. There's no thing saying like you can't advertise, you can't put out, that kind of stuff. And so it's it can be a scary place. And I want to clarify that TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, any of the social media sites can be super beneficial. I would hope that the good intentions that some of this stuff was started with lives on in spirit, even if it doesn't live on in anybody who created these things, because that's what is cool about these, is they do have benefit, but we have to know how, and we have to understand. But like, this is TikTok obviously is the one that is owned by a company in another country that is not very friendly with us.
Yeah, and I mean, like, that's when India banned TikTok nationally. It was a concern over age requirements, because even young children could figure out how to operate the app. There was concerns about like human trafficking or people trying to be predatory to young children, and they were like, the company's not doing enough to protect them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that was India's primary motivating force, was that, where I think in kind of the European and American perspective, it's more about protecting. We do it under the guise of protecting like governmental like sovereignty, and trying to limit foreign influence in our election cycle, which we are smack dab in the middle of.
Yep.
So with that,
I think that, I mean,
it's getting banned. If it gets sold, it'll be back.
yeah.
And as long as Americans are the ones, scraping your data and driving your algorithm,
And
I guess we're cool with it.
we're good with it. So, all right, guys. Bark, anything else?
I feel like I've been very little help today. I feel like I've argued on both sides of it.
But we're not trying to prove a point either way. We're just trying to lay out the facts of like banning TikTok. And I mean, that's what we do as history teachers, right? Like we let kids and we let people decide for themselves, but we try and lay out as much as possible or put them in the right direction to figure it out as much as possible for their own selves.
Give you the information to draw your own conclusion.
Yep. And so you have been
not feed you the conclusion like the mainstream media.
Yep. Dun, 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 dun. So we had sound effects.
Bum, 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 bum.
Yep, nailed it. All right, guys. Well, until next time, I'm the turn.
I'm the bark.
We're gonna be here a long time. Have a good night, everybody.
Be safe.
By golly, you just be well.